My name is Jonathan Grandma. I was hired again here today as a communications consultant to address the internal issues facing Lucas Precision Tools today. I understand that you guys are having trouble rolling out the new computer manufacturing systems, the CMSs. So Julie, Jane, Bill, and Robert, let's all try to work together again to come up with a creative solution to get on the same page by collaborating. Julie, by the end of this consultation, you will have an outline process that will help you find an agreement between Jane, Bill, and Robert. And Jane, Bill, and Robert, you guys will have an outline process on how to deal with your employees. And this will make rolling out the new computer manufacturing systems more effective and more efficient. All right, guys, let's begin by talking about different approaches to conflict management style. Now, Jane, I understand you want to roll out the new CMs as quickly as possible by following the forcing style, which is win-lose. And I could tell this because you're very goal-oriented and you believe the supervisors just make the executive decision over the employees, and you believe the supervisors should just decide without any feedback from the employees. However, Jane, Bill has raised some concerns as Bill's style of conflict management is accommodating, which is lose-win. And Bill, you care deeply about your relationships with your employees. You want them to deliberate and provide a final solution. You feel like the employees are best suited to manage themselves. However, this conflicts with Robert's style of conflict management, as Robert is stylistically most similar to the compromising style, which is both win, both lose. Because like Jane, you think supervisors should make final decisions, but like Bill, you are at least going to communicate with your employees and see where they're at and try to compromise. Although you all have your own ways of dealing with conflict with their pros and cons, the solution to getting on the same page is collaborating. That's the best style for you guys, which is win-win. And this is balancing both goals, Jane, and relationships, Robert, and resolving using dialogue talk, which we'll get into later. Not using positions of power to achieve goals, Jane, and everyone should feel like they win. Now let's shift to methods of principal negotiations, which is a Harvard-developed program and is designed to help organizations reach an agreement without jeopardizing business. 4 out of 5 of these methods can apply to the problem that Lucas Precision Tools is facing today. To begin, we need to separate the people from the problem. Negotiation can be broken down into 3 subcategories: perception, emotion, and communication. It is important to remember that negotiators are people first. They have their own thoughts, cultures, and emotions. And communication is the main aspect of negotiating. And common problems you guys might face is not speaking clearly, speaking just to speak, just for the sake of it, not actively listening, listening to argue, and finally, misunderstanding/misinterpreting. Next, we have focus on interests and not positions. The second principle entails focusing on the interests behind the positions. You guys should discuss your interests in selecting employees to train on the new CMs and keep an open mind to opposing views. Moving on, we got invent options for mutual gain. This principle focuses on finding creative solutions so no one feels as though they're compromising or losing their own position, and finding an option that impacts everybody positively. It is key to listen to one another before decisions are made so people are heard, and transparency with conversations are very important, as well as your intentions. And the final principle of negotiation is insist on using positive criteria. Conversations need to stay on topic and productive. You guys need to make decisions based on objective and practical criteria by keeping an open mind, don't give it to pressure and threats, and determining what the other party's intentions are. You guys are in charge of keeping one another and the employees engaged and committed to the conversation. Moving on, we will look at the humanistic model of communication. Robert, Bill, Jane, and Julie, there are 5 ideal qualities to the humanistic model of communication. The first one is openness, the ability to react honestly and create environments of open conversation, and 2-way flows of communication. Jane, you could be more open to your employees and hearing feedback from them instead of just forcing them into positions that they may not want to take. Bill, you could be more open to hearing suggestions from Robert and Jane. And Robert, you could also be more open in hearing what Bill and Jane have to say. The second one is empathy. You guys need to feel and experience from others' point of view. Jane, I know you want to make the decision and it should just be final, but you got to consider how your workers might feel because this is a big change. And Bill, you might be empathetic to your workers, but you got to consider how Julie, Jane, and Robert are feeling in and rolling out these new CMs. The third one is supportiveness. Try to support each other and empathize through this change by being descriptive as opposed to judgmental. Jane, you need to be more supportive to your team. Bill, you need to be more supportive of Julie, Jane, and Robert. And Robert, you need to be more supportive of the staff, Julie, Jane. The next one is positiveness. Don't be critical because of different opinions. Open acknowledgement. Jane, Bill, and Robert, all three of you have been overly critical of one another, hence the reason why Julie called me here today. And by following the humanistic model of communication, these will allow you guys to exchange good information without trickery, manipulation, or distortion. And finally, you have equality. You need to communicate with one another and your employees as equals and treat every problem-solving situation as if you're on the same level and show respect through feedback. Jane, I know you are management, but for the new CMs to be implemented smoothly, you need to level with your employees. And Bill did a good job with that, but you need to provide input too. You can't just let your employees be giving you feedback. And Robert, try to level with Jane and Bill. And now let's move to Dialogue Talk. Dialogue Talk is an acronym for constructive communication for problem solving. D stands for descriptive, non-judgmental language to explain situations. I stands for I messages, to tell your story and how you feel about things. So you got to start with I don't want this to happen. I want this to happen, you know. A stands for ask questions to get, the other person's side of their story and ask them how they might feel. L stands for listen actively to get the meaning of the communication. O is for open acknowledgement of their story and for situations and for their humanity, how they are. G is for genuine support for them and efforts to resolve. U stands for understanding first and suspending judgment and try to understand the other side of the person you're communicating with. And E stands for emotional self-management. So even if you feel very emotional, you gotta come down from that hot place and come down to a cool place of being calm, cool, and collected. You guys need to move from control talk with you messages and judgmental language being manipulative, and instead try the principle of negotiations through dialogue talk. Jane, you are not doing a very good job with this, as you don't really ask questions to get the right story. You don't really listen actively. You don't openly acknowledge your employees, and you don't show genuine support for them and efforts to resolve, because you just want to decide who gets to get trained on the new CMs. But doing those things will help you guys get on the same page. You guys can be more open and have all that open acknowledgement by being situational, personal, disarming, and hypothetical. Robert and Bill, you seem to be somewhat good at dialogue talk with employees, but try engaging with dialogue talk with Julie and Jane, because you all need to be on the same page about this. Julie, it is key that you engage your supervisors in dialogue talk. You need to lead them. You are senior management, and demonstrate what good management looks like by following dialogue talk so that they can implement similar communication styles with their employees. Dialogue talk takes longer, I have to admit, but it is more effective form of communication with the 4 W's and the 2 H's. Who, what, where, when, how, and how much. Don't ask why. It's just a problematic question. And dialogue talk supports exchange of good information, truthful, accurate, relevant, and understandable. All right, let's continue with Kurt Lewin's 3-phase of influence, change, and process, developed by a psychologist from the 20th century. Jane, Bill, and Robert, and especially Julie, you need to pay attention to these next few concepts, as they will help you in figuring out a strategy for implementing the new CMs. Lewin's model follows 3 simple steps. Unfreezing. Julie, this is key for you. I need to feel an arousal of motivation for change and demonstrate that to Jane, Bill, and Robert, and they'll do the same by lowering barriers of resistance and beginning the changing process by being open to change. The second step is changing. This is data collection, developing new attitudes based on new information, consulting, interviews, like you were doing, Robert, etc. And then refreezing. You need to stabilize all the changes that you made and integrate the changes for the new CMs. You need to refreeze by integrating new changes into employee values and relationships. This three-step process, unfreezing, changing, and refreezing, outlines how to go about influencing change processes smoothly so employees, Jane, Bill, or Robert, and you, Julie, can all get on the same page about implementing the new CMs. Moving forward, let's discuss strategies for dealing with resistance to change, as implementing the new CMs is a big change, and already there have been members of this organization that are not on the same page. So let's try to agree on an approach. Even if you did dialogue talk and principal negotiations and unfreezing and change and refusing and everything else I just talked about, there's bound to be resistance to changes in an organization. And the reasons why there's resistance to change is because there's stress of status and influence and the loss of relationships. There's organizational restructuring with a higher pyramid and more classy bureaucracy, which employees don't really like, and a lack of resources. And there's how to deal with them, and it requires education and support and participation through the 6 strategies for dealing with resistance to change. The first 3 are education and communication, participation and involvement, and facilitation and support. All these 3 steps must occur before changes like implementing the new CMs happen, and not after, because if you go through these first 3 steps and educate and participate through involvement and facilitate and support, it'll make the process a lot more smoother because people feel more easy about it. Now, the next 3 steps, if those 3 didn't work, are negotiation agreement, manipulation and co-option, and explicit and implicit coercion with or else messages, I'll fire you, and obviously nobody likes that. And hopefully it doesn't come down to this by following the first 3 steps. And by following the first 3, Julie, you won't have to be explicit and implicitly coercing them. And then finally, we will see how 20th century economist Larry Greiner's model can help all of us get on the same page about the new CMs. Greiner's model is managed from the top. So that's you, Julie, Jane, Bill, and Robert. And first step is pressure and arousal felt for external reasons. And there's external reasons for implementing new CMs, right, Julie? Obviously, you guys want to stay competitive. And Jane, Bill, or Robert, you guys need to get on the same page and feel the arousal to change. The next step is reorientation and intervention at the strategic apex, which is leadership. Change is being led by the heads and of the company, the management, and the leaders of Lucas Precision Tools, which is you guys, and bringing consultants like me to help deliberate. The third stage is diagnosis and recognition. Data collection throughout the organization, from all the way to the top to the bottom, at all levels. And the fourth step is invention and commitment, wide search for creative solutions. The fifth step is experimentation and more search, pilot projects, and employees really just want to see how you guys react to the new CMs, and they're gonna watch their boss and see how they react. And finally, positive reinforcement and acceptance by rewarding, recognizing, and just refreezing after everything happens, and collaboration continues. For reorientation and intervention, senior management must go through previously discussed Lewin's 3 stages to gain new perspective. For the fourth step, invention and commitment, the middle line management, which is Jane, Bill, and Robert, you guys must also go through Lewin's 3 stages. And for the fifth step, experimental and more search, employees must go through Lewin's 3 stages. So at every single level of the organization, you guys need to go through phases of change. Well, Julie, Jane, Bill, and Robert, thank you for enlisting the help of GCC. And I believe Julie now has an outline process on how to get the 3 of you to agree on an approach. Thank you and goodbye.